Well, oil prices fell for a second day today after the International Energy Agency warned that demand growth for crude and its products had slowed sharply as surging cases of COVID-19 worldwide has forced government to revive restrictions on movement. Brent crude was down 31 cents at $71 a barrel after dropping 13 cents in the previous session. U.S. crude was off by 33 cents at $68.76 a barrel, while having fallen 0.2% yesterday. The benchmarks are still heading for a slight gain this week. Increasing demand for crude ground to a halt in July and is set to rise to a slower pace over the rest of 2021 because of the surge in infections from the Delta variant of COVID-19. In sharp contrast, though, OPEC held its forecast for a rebound in oil demand globally this year and further growth in 2022, notwithstanding the rising concern about the surge in COVID-19 infections. Now, yesterday, the United States asked for a boost in output from OPEC, and now we see demand dwindling because of revival of restrictions to curb the spike in COVID cases. All this affects Nigeria's revenue and had the federal government approve $1.5 billion for the rehabilitation of the Port Harcourt oil refinery. We now have Mr. Bismarck, Rewane, the Chief Executive Officer of Financial Derivatives Company, to help us connect these pieces together, especially as it concerns Nigeria. Good morning, Mr. Rewane. Good to have you on the show.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. So the price of oil is down for 2 consecutive days now. How much impact should we expect this to have on the Federation accounts for this month?
Well, it's 2 days is nothing in an oil market, in the oil markets. So what is happening now is that we have to look at what was the average price of oil in this quarter, in Q3. The average price of oil today for the whole of this quarter is about $74, $73 a barrel, compared to our planned benchmark of $40 a barrel, compared to the average quarterly price in the second quarter, which was almost about $69 a barrel. Secondly, there's the production. Our quota has been increased from 1.48 now to 1.8 million barrels. So having said that, the total revenue that this country will get from its joint venture and its other offshore activities will actually come in, at today's prices, will come in at about almost $14 to $15 billion a quarter, compared to about $11 billion a quarter at this time last year. So basically, I think that we are in a better place today. However, our commitments to meet our obligations, 1, and 2, to stimulate the economy out of this tepid, slow, and fragile growth, we need additional money. Also, bear in mind that foreign remittances, workers' remittances back into Nigeria declined, and foreign portfolio investors took their money out. So when you put all of this together, find the current account is still going to be in deficit, and the balance of trade will be much better than last year, but we still have a long way to go.
All right, Mr. Ronnie, when prices drop, Nigeria's subsidy reduces, but it also reduces the country's revenue. Which scenario is better for the country?
There's no, what we look for is an optimal solution. You can't make omelette without breaking eggs. You have to understand that. So today, the landed cost of a liter of PMS is 250 naira. Today, it's being sold at 165 naira. So in other words, what you have is that the federal government of Nigeria is subsidizing every liter of petrol with 85 naira per liter. That is a significant amount. It comes to almost 2.2 trillion naira a year. Our budget, mind you, is 13 trillion naira. So are subsidies sustainable? No. Are they injurious to the economy? Yes. But the question is, what do you do with the increased revenue for the government if the people have to pay more? The people are sweltering. The people are under pressure. So there must be accountability as to the use of funds. There must be accountability of the impact of that use of funds on the people's lives, because the well-being of Nigerians has been threatened over the past 15 to 20 years. So the answer to your question is that there's no silver bullet. 2, you cannot have higher revenue and not use it to support your people. And the Nigerians should understand that we are a large country, but we are not a rich country. Therefore, we have to pay our way.
Well, a large country, but not a rich one. But how does all of this affect the operations of, the companies in Nigeria who deal in oil? How does it affect their revenue, their operations, when we talk about all of this?
It's a very interesting question, because last year, the stock market, which reflects the potential earnings and the future earnings of companies on the stock price of today, we had the stock market rise by about 50% last year. But this year so far, we've lost about almost, because of yesterday's good performance, we have lost about 1.8%. Now, but what is interesting is that in the last 2 months, we've seen the market gain about almost 3%. In the last quarterly earnings, average revenue growth was up 39%, and I said, to 1.67 trillion. So whilst the economy grew by only 0.5%, the average revenue growth of companies went up by 39%. The average PAT, profit after tax, of the top 7 companies went up by 69% to 275 billion naira. Their free cash flow went up by 46%. So the companies that are doing well are doing very well. Those that are suffering are struggling. And like Fela says, suffering and smiling, 48 standing, 48 sitting. So this is a tide that will lift only a few boats, but those few boats will be able to employ people, pay taxes, and actually make the economy much better.
All right, we keep talking about, refining locally, which is why the government approved the $1.5 billion for the rehabilitation. But can this really eliminate importation of PMS?
Well, you see, the whole rehabilitation and restructuring of the Nigerian refineries is a controversial issue. And I think more importantly is the fact that we need to invest in viable entities. And I know NNPC said something, that they were going to pay a dividend this year, September, which I think is a precursor for listing the company, commercializing it, and changing its total orientation when the PIB is finally assented to. But secondly, the NNPC did, and the Federal Executive Council approved the acquisition of a 25% interest in the Dangote refinery, petrochemical, and fertilizer complex, which is a major 650,000 barrel a day, single train refinery, cutting edge technology. So you have to put all of these things together and say, well, one, what do we want to accomplish? We want to accomplish available petrol at an effective price, competitive with our West African neighbors so that we discourage smuggling, and also not to distort the allocation of resources by subsidizing this commodity. Don't forget that as we speak, kerosene is not subsidized, diesel is not subsidized, and other products from the fractional distillation column of the refineries are not. The only one being subsidized, scandalously, is PMS.
All right, so talking about the refineries, and of course, when we talk about refining locally, we cannot help but talk about Dangote refinery, which is, the expectation is high if it is allowed to run optimally, because we hear some, although the APCON has come to say that they are not taking over the company, but, do you see this being the permanent solution to this problem when you talk about Dangote refinery?
Okay, let me put some context. One is that the Dangote refinery is a hub, what I call a hub refinery. The Dangote refinery and other refineries put together, Nigeria will be the hub for supplying refined products to the whole of West Africa, because today refineries are on a hub and spoke basis. In other words, there are hubs in Houston, hubs in Sao Paulo, hubs in Rotterdam, Singapore, and also in China. So those hubs take care of the whole area. Refineries are high-volume, low-margin businesses. Refineries produce products, so you have all of the from gas all the way down. So there are these speculative rumors about the Dangote refinery being overpriced. 1, 2, that they are overburdened with debt. But first and foremost, let us understand something. The fantasy and hallucination have no basis for factual analysis. If that rumor, which I ordinarily would have discounted, that they have $8 billion of debt service. The Nigerian government, with all of its debt, is not paying more than $2 billion a year in debt service. In fact, less than that for external debt service. So Saudi Arabia as a country exports $140 billion. For you to pay $8 billion in debt service, your debt has to be about $140 to $150 billion, which is maybe twice the size of the Lagos economy and almost half of the size or one-third of the size of the Nigerian economy. No Nigerian entity, even the government of Nigeria, can have that kind of borrowing. We would have been submerged as a country. So even in falsehood, there has to be some dimension to it to ensure that it can be subject to a reality test. So first and foremost, let us say it is not factual, it is hypothetical, and it's alternative facts, in other words, fake news. Now, let us talk about what are the benefits of the Dangote refinery complex and petrochemicals to West Africa as a whole, because West Africa imports so much and of refined products. So that takes care of the West African need for not only PMS, diesel, petrochemicals, fertilizer. In fact, the fertilizer is already in the market. So when you look at it, it's a productivity thing. The fact that we are not going to, what will happen, there will be no queues, the subsidies will be reduced, if not eliminated, and the Nigerian government will benefit because the Nigerian government has a 20% stake in this and all other refineries, modular refineries in the country. So the question of the scandal of petrol queues and all that will be put to rest once and for all. But at a price. And the thing is that the transactions have to be transparent, authentic, and accountable so that the Nigerian people can see that nobody's being gouged. I think that is critical to this whole transaction. And let's face it, that the Dangote Cement Company had revenue growth of over 40%. And not to talk about profitability. Dangote Refinery and Dangote Cement is paying VAT of 250 million naira a day, and has tax for credit swaps of about 309 billion. There you can see the road from Tinkan all the way to Bagada and many other roads for that matter. MTN, for example, is doing the Enugu-Onitsha road in part of the tax. So when you look at all those companies, at least it's top 7 that we are, 1, they're all doing well. 2, they're all taking advantage of the tax or road to tax initiatives. Also, they employ, amongst them, they employ almost 500,000 people. Not to talk of the taxes they pay, not to talk of the fact that they keep the economy going and humming, and that these products are used by other people, other sectors of the economy to make them competitive and to maintain Nigeria's inclusive and sustainable growth, which is what we require today, because the economy is under a lot of pressure.
All right, Mr. Ronnie, before we let you go, but how much of a challenge is crude oil theft in the country?
Well, crude oil theft is as old as crude oil production in Nigeria. But it has risen to an alarming level. So we call that it's a criminal enterprise. And after a while, it becomes self-fulfilling and self-destructive. So today, I think there's a loss of about anything between 200,000 to 300,000 barrels. Nigeria and the Gulf of Guinea is responsible for 90% of all the piracy activity in the world. That report came out last week. So it's a threat, and what we call the above-the-ground risk in Nigeria is higher than below-the-ground risk. And above-the-ground risk is what you call theft. And actually, it is something that has to be, when you talk about insecurity and insurgency, that is number one threat, because it threatens not only the country, it threatens everybody. All the state governments, local governments, and federal government make their revenue from this. So it cannot be tolerated. And to finalize this, let me tell you, the refineries will be of no use if you don't have pipeline infrastructure to bring the crude to the refineries and take the finished products to the markets. Those pipelines have to be protected. And as long as you have this kind of insecurity, which threatens not only the production of the crude itself, but threatens the product and all the lines, all the pipelines, all the way to Maiduguri, from Warri to Port Harcourt, then we have a problem. So we have to deal with the insecurity, not only at the Boko Haram level, not only at the banditry level, but more importantly, at the level of protecting our golden goose, the goose that lays the golden egg, which is oil and gas in Nigeria.
All right, Mr. Rewane, we'll have to leave it there now. Thank you so much for coming on Business Morning. Mr. Bismarck Rewane is the CEO of Financial Derivatives Company. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
All right, after the break, Ihizwa Hub partners with Torrens University Australia and offers scholarship opportunities. We'll get the details later. Do stay with us. This is Business Morning.